The morning rain had turned the cobblestones slick and dark, but Delilah Kane still pushed her flower cart to the corner of Fifth and Madison, just as the sun broke through the clouds. She had been selling flowers on this corner for 3 years now, ever since her father passed and left her with nothing but his old wooden cart and a determination to make something of herself. The flowers she arranged each morning were more than just petals and stems to her. They were tiny pieces of hope bundled together with twine, offerings of beauty in a world that often felt gray. She was adjusting a bundle of white roses when she noticed him for the first time. He was tall, probably over 6 feet, with dark hair that looked like it had been styled professionally, but had been mussed by the wind. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, the kind that probably cost more than her entire month's rent. But what caught her attention was the way he paused mid-stride when he saw her cart, as if something about the sight of flowers on a wet Tuesday morning had pulled him out of whatever thoughts occupied his mind. He walked over slowly, his hands tucked into the pockets of his coat. His eyes scanned the buckets of flowers, and she watched as something softened in his expression. Up close, she could see he had gray eyes, the color of storm clouds, and a jawline sharp enough to cut glass. He looked tired, she thought, the kind of tired that sleep did not fix. "What would you recommend?" he asked, his voice deeper than she expected. Delilah smiled, wiping her damp hands on her apron. "Depends on what you need them for. Apology, celebration, just because, he said, and the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "Something that says there is still good in the world, I suppose." She felt something warm bloom in her chest at those words. Most of her customers barked orders at her or barely looked up from their phones. This man, whoever he was, seemed to actually care about what he was buying. "Then I would go with the sunflowers," she said, reaching for a bundle she had arranged that morning. "They are resilient. They follow the sun even on cloudy days. They remind us to look for the light." He took the bundle from her, studying the bright yellow petals with an intensity that seemed almost excessive for flowers. "Perfect," he said quietly. He pulled out his wallet and handed her a $20 bill for a $10 arrangement. "Keep the change." Before she could protest, he was already walking away, the sunflowers tucked under his arm like they were something precious. That was day 1. He came back the next morning and the morning after that. Each day he arrived around 8:15, always in a suit that looked expensive, always with that same tired look in his eyes. Each day he bought flowers. Sometimes roses, sometimes lilies, sometimes the wildflower arrangements she put together with whatever looked prettiest at the market. He never explained what he did with them, and she never asked, but she started looking forward to his arrivals with an anticipation that surprised her. By the end of the first week, she learned his coffee order by accident. He always had a cup from the cafe 2 blocks down, always black, and the smell of it mingled with his cologne in a way that made her want to lean closer when he stood at her cart. She learned that he was left-handed from the way he reached for his wallet. She learned that he had a small scar above his right eyebrow that she only noticed when the morning sun hit his face at the right angle. By the second week, they had progressed to actual conversations beyond just flower recommendations. She learned his name was William Zimmerman, though he said most people called him Will. She told him her name was Delilah, and he said it was pretty, which made her cheeks flush in a way she had not experienced since high school. "You must really love flowers," she said one morning as she wrapped a bundle of pink peonies in brown paper. "I am starting to," he replied, and something about the way he looked at her when he said it made her hands fumble with the twine. By the third week, she realized she was putting extra care into her appearance on weekday mornings. She would wake up 15 minutes earlier to actually do something with her hair instead of just pulling it back in a messy ponytail. She started wearing the nicer of her two aprons, the one without the permanent dirt stains. She told herself it was because spring was coming and she wanted to look more professional, but deep down, she knew she was lying to herself. William seemed to be lingering longer at her cart too. What started as 2-minute transactions had stretched into 10, sometimes 15-minute conversations. He asked about her day, about where she sourced her flowers, about how she got into this business. She found herself telling him about her father, about how he had been a florist his whole life, about how she was trying to save up enough money to actually open a real shop instead of just selling from a cart. "That is a good dream," William said on a rainy morning during week 4. He was holding an umbrella over both of them, shielding her cart from the drizzle. "You should hold on to it." "What about you?" she asked, feeling bold. "What do you dream about?" Something flickered across his face, too fast for her to read. "I used to dream about building things. Creating something that mattered. Lately, I have been dreaming about simpler things. Morning coffee, fresh flowers, conversations with interesting people." She wanted to ask what he meant by that, wanted to know what had happened to put that bone-deep weariness in his eyes, but a customer approached, and the moment passed. Week 5 brought warmer weather, and Delilah expanded her cart to include more spring blooms. Tulips in every color, hyacinths that made the whole corner smell sweet, delicate ranunculus that looked like tissue paper. William bought something different every day, but she noticed he had a preference for the simpler arrangements. Nothing too showy, nothing too elaborate. Just honest flowers presented beautifully. "You have someone special you give all these flowers to?" she asked one morning, trying to make her voice sound casual even though her heart was hammering. She had been wondering for weeks now, had been half afraid of the answer. William looked at her for a long moment and she could not read his expression. "Not in the way you are thinking," he finally said. "I take them to my office. They make the space feel less sterile." Relief flooded through her, which was ridiculous. Just because he was not buying flowers for a girlfriend did not mean anything. He probably did not even think of her as anything more than the flower seller he saw each morning. He was clearly successful, clearly from a different world than her own. Men like him did not date women who sold flowers from carts. But then he added, "Though I will admit, the main reason I keep coming back is not the flowers. It is the company." She looked up sharply, meeting those gray eyes, and saw something there that made her breath catch. He was not just being polite. He meant it. "I enjoy our conversations too," she said softly, and his face broke into a real smile for the first time since she had met him. It transformed him completely, made him look years younger, and she thought absently that he should smile more often. Week 6 passed in a blur of increasingly flirtatious conversations and lingering glances. William started bringing her coffee from the cafe, always with the exact amount of cream and sugar she liked, even though she had only mentioned it once. She started setting aside the best flowers for him before she even opened the cart to other customers. They talked about everything and nothing. He told her about growing up in Boston, about his younger sister who lived in California, about how he had always been good at math, which led him to study business. She told him about growing up in Queens, about learning to arrange flowers at her father's elbow, about her dream of having a shop with a real storefront, and her name painted on the window. During week 7, an older woman approached Delilah's cart while William was there. She looked between the two of them and smiled knowingly. "You make a lovely couple," she said as Delilah wrapped up her order of daisies. "Oh, we are not," Delilah started, but the woman had already walked away. William was quiet for a moment, and Delilah felt mortification creeping up her neck. Sorry about that, she mumbled. People assume things. Would it be so terrible, William asked quietly, if people assumed that? Her eyes snapped to his face. He was watching her carefully, and there was something vulnerable in his expression that she had never seen before. This man who carried himself with such confidence, who wore suits that probably cost thousands of dollars, was looking at her like he actually cared about her answer. No, she whispered. It would not be terrible at all. The smile he gave her then was worth 1,000 flowers. Week 8 brought an unexpected cold snap, and Delilah showed up to her corner shivering in a jacket that was too thin. William took one look at her and disappeared, returning 20 minutes later with a thick wool coat from the department store 3 blocks over, tags still attached. I cannot accept this, she protested, even as her fingers itched to touch the soft material. Will, this is too much. It is just a coat, he said, but they both knew it was not just a coat. Please, Delilah, I cannot concentrate at work knowing you are out here freezing. She let him drape it over her shoulders, and it smelled like the store, like newness and possibility. It fit perfectly. Thank you, she said, feeling tears prick at her eyes for reasons she could not fully articulate. Anytime, he said softly, and his hand lingered on her shoulder for just a moment before he pulled away. That night, Delilah looked up William Zimmerman on her phone, something she had deliberately avoided doing before. What she found made her stomach drop. William Zimmerman was not just successful. He was wealthy beyond anything she had imagined. He was the CEO of Zimmerman Holdings, a real estate development company his grandfather had founded that was now worth billions. There were articles about him in business magazines, photos of him at charity galas wearing tuxedos and standing next to celebrities and politicians. She looked around her tiny studio apartment, at the second-hand furniture and the water stain on the ceiling, and felt the vast distance between their worlds open up like a chasm. What was she doing? He was a billionaire, and she sold flowers from a cart. This could not possibly go anywhere. He was probably just being nice, killing time on his morning walk, amusing himself with a pretty distraction before he went to his office and made million-dollar deals. But the next morning, when he showed up at her cart, right at 8:15 like always, the way his whole face lit up when he saw her made her doubts seem silly. Whatever this was between them, it was real. She could see it in the way he looked at her, in the way he remembered every little detail she mentioned, in the way he had learned to read her moods and always seemed to know exactly what to say. Week 9 tested her resolve. A health inspector showed up and told her she needed additional permits to operate her cart, permits that would cost money she did not have. She was crying when William arrived, so frustrated and scared that she could not hide it. He sat down on the curb beside her, not caring that it was probably ruining his expensive suit, and listened while she poured out her fears. Fears about losing the cart, about letting down her father's memory, about failing at the only thing she knew how to do. How much do you need? William asked when she finally ran out of words. No, she said immediately, knowing what he was offering. I appreciate it, Will, I do, but I cannot take money from you. I need to do this myself. That is not failure, accepting help when you need it, he said gently. That is being smart. It would change things between us, she said, wiping at her eyes. I do not want money to complicate whatever this is. He was quiet for a long moment. What is this, Delilah, between us? She looked at him, at this man who had become the best part of her mornings, who made her laugh and made her think and made her hope for things she thought she had given up on. I do not know, she whispered, but I do not want to lose it. You would not, he said firmly. But I respect your independence, so let me help in a different way. I know people at the city. Let me make some calls, see if I can figure out what is going on with these permits. No money, just information and maybe some guidance. She nodded, relief flooding through her. He made those calls that afternoon, and by the next morning she learned that she had been targeted by a scam. The man claiming to be a health inspector had been running a scheme on street vendors for months. The real city office confirmed her existing permits were fine. William had saved her from losing hundreds of dollars and probably saved her cart in the process. "I do not know how to thank you," she said when he stopped by later that week. "Have dinner with me," he said, so casually that she almost missed it. Her heart jumped into her throat. "What?" "Dinner," he repeated, and now there was nervousness in his voice that she had never heard before. Not as the flower seller and the customer, not as friends, as something more if you are willing. "Yes," she said before she could overthink it. "Yes, I would like that very much." They planned dinner for Saturday night, which meant she had 3 full days to panic about what to wear, and whether she would know how to act in whatever fancy restaurant he would inevitably choose. But when Saturday arrived and he picked her up from her apartment, he took her to a small Italian place in Brooklyn that was family-owned and unpretentious. "I know you probably expected something fancier," he said as they settled into a booth with red checkered tablecloths. "But this place has the best pasta in the city, and I thought it would be more comfortable than some stuffy Manhattan restaurant." She loved him a little bit for that, for knowing her well enough to understand what she would prefer. Loved him for the way he asked her about her dreams and actually listened to the answers. Loved him for the way he laughed at her jokes and told her stories about his own life that made him seem less like an untouchable billionaire and more like just a man trying to figure things out. Over tiramisu, he told her about the years after business school, about the pressure of taking over his family company, about losing himself in work until days blurred together, and he woke up one morning realizing he had not felt genuine joy in years. Then one Tuesday morning, I saw a woman selling flowers on a street corner, and she smiled at me like I was a person instead of a portfolio or a deal to be made. And I thought, maybe the world is not as gray as I have been painting it. Maybe I just needed to remember where to look for color. Delilah felt tears prick at her eyes. "That is the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me." He reached across the table and took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I have been trying to work up the courage to ask you out for weeks. I kept telling myself I needed to be patient, needed to make sure this was not just some passing attraction. But every morning, I woke up excited just to see you. Every night, I went to bed thinking about something you said that made me laugh or made me think. You have become the best part of my days, Delilah. You are the best part of mine, too," she whispered. He walked her home that night, and they stood outside her building as the city hummed around them. "Can I see you tomorrow?" he asked. "I will be at my cart in the morning," she said teasingly. "I meant not at your cart. On a real date again. Maybe Central Park. We could walk around, get lunch from one of those vendors, just spend time together." She smiled up at him, at this man who could probably afford to take her anywhere in the world but wanted to walk through a park on a Sunday afternoon. "I would love that." He leaned down slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and kissed her softly. His lips were warm and gentle, and the kiss tasted like tiramisu and promise. When he pulled back, he rested his forehead against hers. "I should tell you something," he said quietly. "I know you looked me up online. I know you know about my company, about the money." She stiffened slightly, embarrassed at being caught. "I am sorry. I was just curious." "Do not apologize. I am glad you know. I was worried about how to tell you, worried it would change things between us. The money makes things complicated sometimes. People treat me differently when they know." "I do not care about your money, Will," she said honestly. "I like you. The person who buys flowers every morning and asks about my day. The person who brought me coffee and made sure I was not being scammed. That is who I care about." "Good," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Because that is who I want to be with you. Just Will, not the CEO or the heir to some fortune, just a man who is falling for an extraordinary woman." That Sunday in Central Park was perfect. They walked for hours, talking and laughing, pausing to watch street performers and feeding ducks by the lake. He bought her a pretzel from a vendor, and she teased him about having finally bought food from a cart vendor instead of just flowers. He pulled her close and kissed her again, right there in the middle of the park with hundreds of people around, and she did not care who saw. Week 10 started with a sense of anticipation humming through her veins. They had been texting constantly over the weekend, silly messages and sweet nothings that made her smile at her phone like a teenager. When Monday morning came, she was almost vibrating with excitement to see him. He showed up at his usual time, but something was different. He looked nervous, his hands fidgeting with his wallet in a way she had never seen before. He bought a bouquet of red roses, her best ones, and then he did not leave. "Delilah," he said, his voice serious, "I need to ask you something." Her heart started pounding. "Okay." He took a deep breath, and she watched him gather his courage. "I know we have only been officially dating for a few days, but I have been coming to your cart every single day for 10 weeks now. I have bought flowers from you 70 times. And every single time, I have left wanting to stay longer, wanting to know you better, wanting to be part of your life in a real and lasting way." He took her hand, and she noticed his palm was slightly sweaty, which she found endearing. "I do not want to just be the guy who buys flowers from you. I do not want to just be your friend or even just the guy you go on dates with occasionally. I want to court you, Delilah. Old-fashioned, serious, with the intention of building something real. I want to take you to dinner and meet your friends and earn the right to call you mine. Would you let me do that? Would you let me court you properly?" Tears were streaming down her face now, and she did not bother wiping them away. Around them, the morning rush continued, people hurrying past on their way to work, but in that moment it felt like they were the only two people in the world. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Yes, Will, I would love that. I want that too." He pulled her into his arms, right there on the street corner where they had met, and kissed her like she was precious, like she was everything. Someone walking past whistled and called out congratulations, and they both laughed, giddy with joy. "I was so nervous," he admitted, pulling back just enough to look at her face. "I've given presentations to boards of directors and negotiated deals worth millions, but asking you, that was the most terrifying thing I have done in years." "Why?" she asked, touching his face gently. "You had to know I would say yes." "I hoped," he said, "but you are extraordinary, Delilah. You could have anyone. I am just the guy who kept showing up." "You are not just anything," she said firmly. "You are kind and thoughtful, and you see me, not just a flower seller, but me. Do you know how rare that is? How special?" He kissed her again, softer this time, reverent. "I will do everything I can to be worthy of you," he whispered against her lips. "You already are," she whispered back. The weeks that followed were like something out of a dream. William courted her with a dedication that took her breath away. He showed up at her cart every morning without fail, but now he would stay for half an hour, helping her arrange flowers and talking with her regular customers. He took her to dinner 3 times a week, sometimes to fancy restaurants where she felt underdressed even in her nicest outfit, but more often to casual places where they could just be together without pretense. He brought her to meet his sister, Jessica, who flew in from California for a weekend. Jessica hugged Delilah within minutes of meeting her and whispered, "I have not seen my brother smile like this in 5 years. Whatever you are doing, keep doing it." Delilah introduced William to her best friend, Maria, who had known her since high school. Maria pulled her aside while William was in the bathroom and said, "Girl, if you do not marry that man, I will question your sanity. He looks at you like you hung the moon." 2 months into their official relationship, William surprised her by taking her to a property in Manhattan, a corner shop with big windows and good light. "What do you think?" he asked. She looked around the empty space, confused. "It is beautiful, but why are we here?" "It is for sale. I thought it might make a good location for a flower shop." He was trying to sound casual, but she could hear the hope in his voice. "Will, I cannot afford something like this. A space in Manhattan. I have been saving for years and I am nowhere close. I want to invest in you," he said, cutting her off gently. "In your dream. I know you want to do this yourself and I respect that. So I am not offering to buy it for you. I am offering to be a silent partner. You can pay me back as the business grows, with interest if it makes you feel better. But Delilah, you are so talented. You have a gift for making people happy with your arrangements. You deserve to have a real space where you can grow that gift into something bigger." She walked around the empty shop, her mind already filling it with flowers. She could see it so clearly, buckets of blooms along one wall, a big work table in the center, her name painted on the window. "What if I fail?" she whispered, voicing her deepest fear. "Then we will figure it out together," he said simply. "But you would not fail. I believe in you, Delilah. I wish you could see yourself the way I see you." She turned to look at him, at this man who had changed her entire world in just a few months. "Okay," she said, decision crystallizing in her mind. "But I am doing this right. We will draw up a proper business agreement. I will pay you back every cent with interest. This is a loan, not a gift." He smiled, pride evident in his expression. "Whatever you want. I will have my lawyers draw up the paperwork." 3 months later, Kane's Flowers opened its doors. The space was everything Delilah had dreamed of, filled with natural light and the sweet scent of hundreds of blooms. William took the day off work to help her set up, carrying heavy buckets and assembling shelving units without complaint. When everything was ready and the open sign was flipped for the first time, he pulled her into his arms. "Your father would be so proud of you," he said softly. She cried happy tears into his shirt, overwhelmed with gratitude and joy and a love so big it felt like it might burst out of her chest. The shop was successful almost immediately. Her regular customers from the cart followed her to the new location, and word of mouth brought in new clients. She hired 2 part-time employees within the first month. William helped her with the business side of things, teaching her about inventory management and profit margins in the evenings after she closed the shop. 6 months into dating, William told her he loved her. They were cooking dinner in his apartment, a sprawling penthouse in Midtown that still intimidated her a little bit with its floor-to-ceiling windows and designer furniture. She was chopping vegetables while he stirred pasta sauce, and she was telling him a funny story about a customer who had tried to pay for roses with a live chicken. He was laughing, really laughing in that way that made his eyes crinkle at the corners, and suddenly he just stopped and looked at her. "I love you," he said, like the words had just fallen out of his mouth without permission. She froze, the knife suspended over a tomato. "What? I love you," he repeated, more firmly this time. "I am in love with you, Delilah Kane. I probably have been since the first week I met you, but I am sure of it now. You make everything better. You make me better. And I needed you to know." She set down the knife carefully and walked over to him, taking his face in her hands. "I love you too," she said, and watched joy spread across his face. "I am completely, utterly in love with you, William Zimmerman." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and the pasta sauce burned a little bit on the stove, but neither of them cared. Meeting his mother was more intimidating than meeting his sister had been. William Zimmerman was a formidable woman in her 60s, elegant and sharp-eyed, who ran several charitable foundations and sat on the boards of multiple organizations. She invited Delilah to lunch at an exclusive club in Manhattan, and Delilah spent the entire morning beforehand trying on every outfit she owned. But William surprised her. After some initial polite small talk, she set down her fork and looked at Delilah directly. "My son has been different since he met you. Lighter. He used to call me once a week out of obligation. Now he calls me 3 times a week because he wants to tell me about something you said or something you did together. So I will be blunt. What are your intentions with my son?" Delilah met her gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated. "I love him, and I plan to keep loving him for as long as he will let me. I know I am not from the same world as your family. I know I do not have money or connections or the right pedigree. But I make him happy and he makes me happy, and I thought that was what mattered." William studied her for a long moment, and then her stern expression softened into a smile. "That is exactly the right answer, and for what it is worth, I do not care about your pedigree. I care that you are good to my son, that you see him for who he is and not what he can provide. Money and connections are worthless if you are miserable. Will was miserable for a long time before he met you." They became friends after that, with William calling Delilah directly to have lunch or go shopping. She even came by the flower shop regularly, claiming Delilah had the best arrangements in the city. William pretended to be annoyed that his mother and his girlfriend were conspiring together, but Delilah could see how happy it made him. 1 year into their relationship, William asked her to move in with him. She hesitated, worried about losing her independence, but he made it clear she could keep her apartment if she wanted, that he just wanted to wake up next to her more mornings than not. She said yes, and moving into his penthouse felt like stepping into a new chapter of her life. She brought her plants and her books and her vintage record player, and he made space for all of it without complaint. She cooked breakfast in his gourmet kitchen and left flowers in every room. He left her notes on the bathroom mirror and learned to keep her favorite ice cream stocked in the freezer. They fell into an easy rhythm, learning the intimate details of living together, the small adjustments and compromises that come with sharing space. The shop continued to thrive. Within a year, Kane's Flowers had become one of the most sought-after florists in Manhattan, with clients ranging from regular people buying birthday bouquets to event planners wanting elaborate installations for weddings and corporate events. Delilah hired more staff, including a talented designer named Sophie, who had a gift for creating whimsical arrangements that looked like something out of a fairy tale. William never asked her for a single payment on the loan he had given her, but she insisted on paying him back anyway. Every month, she transferred money into his account, and every month he tried to refuse it, but she was stubborn. 2 years after opening, she made the final payment, and he took her out to celebrate, pride written all over his face. "You did it," he said over champagne at the same Italian restaurant where they had their first date. "You built something incredible, all on your own." "Not on my own," she corrected. "You helped me get started. You believed in me when I was not sure I believed in myself." "I just gave you the opportunity," he said, taking her hand across the table. "You did all the hard work. You are extraordinary, Delilah. I hope you know that." She smiled at him, at the man she had fallen completely and irrevocably in love with, and felt grateful for every morning he had shown up at her flower cart. Grateful for his patience, his kindness, his unwavering support. 2.5 years into their relationship, on a spring morning that reminded her of the day they met, William showed up at her shop right before opening. She was arranging a display of tulips in the window when she heard the door chime. "We are not open yet," she called without turning around. "I will just be a minute," he said, and she spun around at the sound of his voice. He was standing in the middle of her shop, surrounded by flowers, wearing jeans and a simple shirt instead of his usual suit. In his hands was a bouquet of sunflowers, the same kind she had sold him on the very first day they met. "Will, what are you doing here? Do you not have that meeting this morning?" "I postponed it," he said, walking toward her slowly. "I have something more important to do." Her heart started racing as she watched him. There was something different about him this morning, a nervous energy that reminded her of the day he had asked to court her. "Delilah Kane," he said, and then he was kneeling, right there in her flower shop, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. "2.5 years ago, I was lost. I had everything money could buy and nothing that actually mattered. I was going through the motions of life without really living. And then I saw you, selling flowers on a street corner, and something in me woke up." Tears were already streaming down her face, her hands pressed to her mouth. "You taught me how to find joy in simple things again. You reminded me what it means to work for something you believe in. You showed me that the best things in life are not built in boardrooms, but in quiet moments over coffee and in long conversations about nothing and everything. You are the most incredible person I have ever met, and I do not want to spend another day without knowing you are going to be mine forever." He opened the box, revealing a ring with a single perfect diamond that caught the morning light. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you have made me?" "Yes," she sobbed, dropping to her knees in front of him. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, and then they were kissing and crying and laughing all at once. Around them, flowers bloomed in every color, filling the air with sweetness, and Delilah thought about how fitting it was that he proposed here, in the shop that represented her dreams, surrounded by the flowers that had brought them together in the first place. Planning the wedding took 6 months, and it was chaos in the best way possible. Eleanor helped with the venue selection, finding a beautiful garden estate outside the city. Jessica flew in to help with dress shopping, and she cried harder than Delilah did when they found the perfect gown. Maria was maid of honor, and she took her duties seriously, organizing a bachelorette party that was equal parts wholesome and wild. William's best man was his childhood best friend, David, who worked as an architect, and who told Delilah embarrassing stories about William as a kid that made her love him even more. The wedding party came together easily, filled with people who genuinely cared about both of them. Delilah insisted on doing all the flowers herself, and she spent weeks designing the perfect arrangements. White roses and peonies for elegance, sunflowers for a touch of brightness, wildflowers mixed in, because that was who she was at her core. Sophie helped her execute the vision, and the result was breathtaking. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, one of those perfect autumn days when the air is crisp and the sky is impossibly blue. Delilah got ready surrounded by the women she loved, feeling pampered and cherished and slightly overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was about to do. When it was time to walk down the aisle, she carried a simple bouquet of sunflowers. She had no father to walk her down the aisle, but Maria and Jessica flanked her on either side, both of them with tears in their eyes. And then she saw William waiting for her at the end of the aisle, and nothing else mattered. He looked devastatingly handsome in his tuxedo, but it was the expression on his face that undid her. He was looking at her like she was the only person in the world, like she was the answer to every question he had ever asked. When she reached him, he took her hands and whispered, "You are so beautiful." The ceremony was traditional but personal, filled with readings they had chosen together and vows they had written themselves. William's voice shook when he promised to love her in sickness and in health, to honor her dreams and support her ambitions, to find joy with her in the simple moments and the extraordinary ones. Her voice broke when she promised to stand by his side, to remind him to find light in dark times, to love him fiercely and without reservation for all the days of her life. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, William pulled her into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, dipping her back in a move that made their guests cheer and whistle. She laughed against his lips, deliriously happy, thinking about how far they had come from that first morning at her flower cart. The reception was a joyful blur. They danced under string lights as the sun set, surrounded by everyone they loved. Eleanor gave a speech that made Delilah cry, talking about how Delilah had given her son back his smile. David gave a speech that made everyone laugh, with stories about William's terrible teenage fashion choices and his tendency to work too hard. Maria gave a speech about watching Delilah come alive again after years of just surviving, about how William had helped her bloom. In a quiet moment between dances, William pulled Delilah outside to the garden terrace. The party continued inside, but out here it was peaceful, just the two of them and the stars. "Happy?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "More than I knew was possible," she said, leaning back into his warmth. "Thank you for buying flowers from my cart." He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest into her back. "Thank you for selling me flowers. Thank you for seeing past the suit and the money to who I really was. Thank you for taking a chance on me." She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who was now her husband. "I would take that chance again every single time. I love you, William Zimmerman." "I love you too, Delilah Zimmerman," he said, and the sound of her new name made her heart soar. They honeymooned in Italy, spending 2 weeks eating incredible food and exploring ancient cities, and making love in hotel rooms with views of the Mediterranean. They visited flower markets in Rome and Florence, and William bought her flowers at every single one, a callback to how they started that made her fall in love with him all over again. When they returned home, they settled into married life with the same ease they had found living together. The shop continued to grow, and William's company launched several new developments. They were both busy, both driven, but they always made time for each other. Morning coffee together before work became sacred. Sunday mornings in bed became their favorite tradition. Date nights happened at least once a week, sometimes at fancy restaurants, but just as often in their kitchen, cooking together and talking about their days. A year into their marriage, Delilah felt the urge to expand her business. She wanted to open a second location, maybe in Brooklyn, somewhere the rents were lower so she could make flowers accessible to more people. William supported her completely, helping her crunch numbers and scout locations. They found a perfect spot in Park Slope, and Kane's Flowers opened its second shop with much fanfare. Around the same time, William made a major career decision. He had been feeling restless at work, wanting to do something more meaningful than just develop properties for profit. He started a division of his company focused on affordable housing, using his resources and knowledge to create beautiful living spaces for people who needed them most. It was not as profitable as his other ventures, but it gave him a sense of purpose he had been missing. "You inspired this," he told Delilah one evening as they reviewed plans for his first affordable housing complex. "You showed me that success is not just about money. It is about making a difference, about using what you have to help others. I want to build things that matter, like you did with your shop." She kissed him softly, proud of the man he was and the man he was becoming. 2 years into their marriage, they started talking seriously about children. It was not a decision either of them took lightly. Delilah worried about balancing a baby with the demands of running 2 flower shops. William worried about being a good father when his own father had been largely absent, consumed by work. But they both wanted it, wanted to create a family together, wanted to bring new life into the world of love they had built. It took 6 months of trying before Delilah saw the positive pregnancy test. She stared at it in the bathroom of their penthouse, her hands shaking, equal parts terrified and elated. She wrapped the test in tissue paper and put it in a small box, which she hid inside a bouquet of baby's breath and pink roses that she brought home that evening. "These are beautiful," William said when he saw them, like he always did. "What is the occasion?" "Open the bouquet," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. "There is something inside." He looked puzzled but carefully pulled apart the flowers until he found the small box. When he opened it and saw the pregnancy test, his face went through a dozen emotions in the span of seconds. Shock, disbelief, hope, and then pure joy. "Really?" he whispered, looking up at her with tears in his eyes. "We are having a baby." "We are having a baby," she confirmed. And then he was lifting her up and spinning her around, both of them crying and laughing. He was incredibly protective during her pregnancy, almost comically so. He insisted she cut back her hours at the shop. He cooked her healthy meals and made sure she took her vitamins. He talked to her growing belly every night, telling their baby stories and promising to be the best father he could be. He went to every doctor's appointment without fail, holding her hand during ultrasounds and asking the doctor 100 questions. When they found out they were having a girl, William cried. "A daughter," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are having a daughter." They spent months preparing the nursery, painting it a soft yellow and filling it with books and stuffed animals. Delilah arranged dried flowers in frames for the walls, creating art that would last. Eleanor knitted blankets and bought far too many tiny outfits. Jessica sent packages from California filled with baby gear and advice. Maria threw Delilah a baby shower that was beautiful and overwhelming in the best way. Labor was long and difficult, 18 hours that tested Delilah's strength in ways she had never imagined. William never left her side, letting her squeeze his hand until it was white, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, whispering encouragement when she was sure she could not go on. And then their daughter was born, arriving in the early hours of the morning with a loud cry that announced her presence to the world. The nurses placed her on Delilah's chest, and she was perfect. Tiny and red-faced and absolutely perfect. "Hi, baby girl," Delilah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We have been waiting for you." William was crying too, looking at his wife and daughter with an expression of such complete love that Delilah knew she would remember this moment for the rest of her life. "Thank you," he whispered to Delilah. "Thank you for her. Thank you for our family." They named her Rose Eleanor Zimmerman, Rose for the flowers that had brought them together, Eleanor after William's mother who cried when she found out. Rose was an easy baby, all things considered, sleeping in reasonable stretches and generally happy to be held by anyone. She had William's gray eyes and Delilah's dark hair, and she was loved beyond measure. Parenthood was harder than either of them anticipated, but also more rewarding. There were sleepless nights and moments of doubt, times when Delilah wondered if she could really balance being a mother with running her businesses. But William was an involved father, waking up for middle-of-the-night feedings and changing diapers without complaint. They figured it out together, like they figured out everything. Delilah cut back her hours at the shops, trusting her staff to handle the day-to-day operations while she spent more time at home. William did the same, delegating more at work and leaving the office at reasonable hours so he could be present for his family. They had help, of course, hiring a nanny for a few hours each day, but they both wanted to be hands-on parents. Rose's first year flew by in a blur of milestones and small miracles. Her first smile, her first laugh, her first tooth, her first word, which was, adorably, flower. By her first birthday, she was cruising along furniture and babbling constantly, a happy little person with a big personality. For Rose's first birthday, they threw a small party at their penthouse, decorated with fresh flowers from both of Delilah's shops. As Delilah watched William hold their daughter while she smashed cake all over her face, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. This life, this family, this love, it was more than she had ever dreamed possible. That night, after Rose was asleep and the apartment was cleaned up, Delilah and William sat on their balcony overlooking the city. He had his arm around her, and she was tucked into his side, perfectly content. "Do you ever think about that first morning?" she asked softly. "When you bought sunflowers from my cart?" "All the time," he admitted. "I think about how close I came to just walking past that day. I was late for a meeting, stressed about a deal that was falling apart, but something made me stop. Best decision I ever made. I think about how nervous I was the day you asked to court me," she said. "Week 10. I was terrified you were just going to stop coming, that whatever we had was going to fade away. Instead, you asked me the question that changed my life." "Changed both our lives," he corrected, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You saved me, Delilah. I was just existing before I met you. You taught me how to really live again." "We saved each other," she said firmly. "You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. You gave me the courage to dream bigger. You loved me before you knew I could love you back. That kind of faith in someone, that kind of patience, that is what saved me." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the city below. Finally, William spoke again. "I want more of this. More moments like these, more years together, more everything, maybe even more babies if you are willing." Delilah laughed softly. "Maybe. Let's get through Rose's terrible twos first. But yes, I want more too, more of everything with you. Forever sounds about right." "Forever sounds perfect," he agreed, and then he kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. 3 years later they welcomed their second child, a son they named Henry James Zimmerman. He had Delilah's nose and William's serious expression, even as a baby. Rose was obsessed with her baby brother, wanting to help with everything from diaper changes to feeding times. Their family felt complete in a way Delilah had not known was missing. Kane's Flowers expanded to 3 locations, and Delilah wrote a coffee table book about flower arranging that became a surprise bestseller. William's affordable housing initiative grew into its own successful company, providing homes for hundreds of families. They were both successful, both fulfilled, but their greatest achievement was the family they had built together. On their 5th wedding anniversary, William surprised Delilah by taking her back to the street corner where her flower cart used to be. He had arranged with the city to have a small bronze plaque installed in the sidewalk, marking the spot. It read, "Here, 2 people met over flowers and found love. May this corner always bring beauty to the world." Delilah cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by the gesture. "You are ridiculous," she said, wiping at her tears. "And I love you so much." "I love you too," he said, pulling her close. "Thank you for selling me flowers that Tuesday morning. Thank you for every morning after. Thank you for saying yes when I finally worked up the courage to ask you to let me court you. Thank you for choosing me, every single day." "Thank you for seeing me," she replied, "for looking past the cart and the dirt under my fingernails and seeing who I really was. Thank you for your patience and your kindness and your unwavering support. Thank you for being the most wonderful husband and father. Thank you for this beautiful life we have built." They stood there on that corner, holding each other as the city moved around them, and Delilah thought about the journey that had brought them here. From flower seller and customer to friends to lovers to husband and wife and parents. It had not always been easy, but it had always been worth it. Years continued to pass in a happy blur. Rose grew into a creative, sensitive child who loved drawing and music and, yes, flowers. She would spend hours in her mother's shops, arranging her own little bouquets. Henry was more analytical, fascinated by how things worked, always taking apart toys to see their mechanisms. He was his father's son in many ways, but he had his mother's kind heart. William's mother became a fixture in their lives, spending every Sunday with them, spoiling her grandchildren and dispensing wisdom to Delilah and William. Jessica visited from California several times a year, and Rose and Henry adored their Aunt Jess, who brought the best presents and told the wildest stories. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Delilah and William renewed their vows in an intimate ceremony in their favorite garden, surrounded by their children and closest friends and family. Their vows were even more meaningful this time, shaped by a decade of marriage, by the challenges they had overcome and the joy they had shared. 10 years ago, I married my best friend, William said, his voice thick with emotion. Today, I stand before you even more in love than I was then. You have made me a better man, a better father, a better human being. You fill our home with laughter and beauty. You show our children what it means to work hard and dream big. You are my partner in every sense of the word, and I am grateful for you every single day. Here is to 10 more years and 10 more after that, and every year until we are old and gray and still holding hands. When I met you, I was barely surviving, Delilah said, tears streaming down her face. I was working hard, but I had forgotten how to hope. You reminded me that life could be more than just getting through each day. You showed me that love is not just a fairy tale, that there really are men who show up every single day, who keep their promises, who choose their partner over and over again. You have given me everything I never knew I needed: a real home, beautiful children, a love that feels safe and exciting all at once. I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you always. They kissed as their family cheered, and Rose and Henry ran up to hug their parents, making it a family embrace. In that moment, surrounded by everyone they loved, with flowers blooming all around them, Delilah felt the perfect rightness of her life. She thought about that scared young woman selling flowers from a cart, just trying to make rent, never imagining that one random Tuesday morning would change everything. She thought about William, lost and tired and going through the motions, who stopped for flowers and found so much more. Life had a funny way of working out. You could plan and prepare, but sometimes the best things happened when you least expected them. Sometimes love showed up in the form of a man in a charcoal suit who bought sunflowers and came back every single day. Sometimes courage meant waiting 10 weeks to ask the question your heart had been shouting since week 1. Sometimes forever started with a simple transaction on a street corner and bloomed into something beautiful. As the sun set on their anniversary celebration, Delilah looked around at everything she had built, not just the successful business, but the family, the love, the life full of meaning and joy. She caught William's eye across the garden, and he winked at her, that same smile on his face that he had given her the day she recommended sunflowers, because they follow the sun even on cloudy days. She had told him that first morning that sunflowers remind us to look for the light. She had not known then that he would become her light, the sun that she turned toward every single day. She had not known that a simple act of selling flowers would lead to this incredible life, but she knew now. She knew that love required patience and courage. She knew that the best relationships were built on friendship and respect, and showing up for each other every single day. She knew that happily ever after was not a destination, but a choice you made over and over again. And she knew, beyond any doubt, that she would choose William Zimmerman every single time. In every lifetime, in every version of their story, she would sell him flowers and fall in love and build this beautiful life together. Forever, she thought, watching him scoop up their children and make them giggle. This is what forever looks like, and it was even better than she had imagined.